Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. A stunning save for a watchdog agency under attack. The conservative Supreme Court rejects conservative claims against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and CFPB Director Rohit Chopra says now they can get back to work.
It's not just about protecting consumers, it's also about making sure that the companies, startups, and others who are playing by the rules are not disadvantaged.
And are we raising an anxious generation? Author Jonathan Haidt on his new book, Taking on Smartphone Addiction.
We parents have had a creeping sense since the early 2010s that something is wrong here.
Those stories, plus a top-ranked golfer booked by police on his way to the PGA Tour, China taking on its real estate woes, and Boeing supplier Spirit AeroSystems chopping staff.
If I had quality issues, I'd be adding 400 employees. I wouldn't be cutting my workforce in half.
It's Friday, May 17th, 2024. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. It's Friday, made it here. The Dow crossed the 40,000 mark in yesterday's session before closing below that. It took the Dow about 3.5 years to go from 30,000 to 40,000, so that's making pretty decent time. In that time, 4 Dow components have actually doubled. American Express, Goldman Sachs, Caterpillar, and Microsoft.
China announcing its most aggressive steps yet to revive its struggling real estate sector. Beijing is going to be set up now a $42 billion relending fund, which they're going to try to put together to help local state-owned companies repurpose unsold properties to public housing. China also eased mortgage rates nationwide, and policymakers calling on local governments to buy some unsold finished homes for struggling developers at, quote, reasonable prices. This is all very socialist. Authorities did not provide details about how those purchases would be funded. China property stocks sharply higher on the back of that news.
You think of the size of the country and the population and the problem, and then you think of 42 billion. Does that sound like a lot of money?
That's what I don't really understand, if it's just some kind of political move or what's happening.
I mean, 42 billion, we barely blink when we spend that on something.
Yeah, but they're hoping that it shores up the market and that in turn kind of turns things. Look, China's facing some difficult issues when their largest trading partner, us, in the past, is not trading with them as frequently and putting on tariffs like this. So they have to look for other places that they can try and prop things up.
But do you think about the property problems in China? And you think, okay, we're going to spend $42 billion. It's like, that seems like spitting in the ocean.
Alan Greenspan, 2008, I think he privately said that the right move would be to burn some houses down in America. Like you'd have to get rid of the housing stock.
Well, we've done that.
Remove it.
We've done that, and now you can't find any housing. No. So we're at that point. And then you've got shares of Reddit that are sharply higher this morning after the social media company announced a partnership with OpenAI that will allow the ChatGPT maker to train its artificial intelligence models on Reddit's content. OpenAI will gain access to Reddit's data applications programming interface, which will provide real-time content. In exchange, Reddit will begin offering certain AI features to users and moderators. Google announced a similar partnership with Reddit back in February. That stock this morning up by about 14% on that news. Last trade above $64 at $64.30.
And that's a big part of what the CEO said is the future of Reddit.
Right, and how they're going to be able to monetize
it.
Right.
Exactly.
Boeing supplier, Spirit AeroSystems, is laying off 400 to 450 workers at its Wichita, Kansas factory amid the production slowdown at Boeing. Okay, we understand that. But Spirit has been at the center of all the quality, or many of the quality issues affecting the 737 MAX jets. Boeing's efforts to reacquire Spirit have been held up because Spirit hasn't reached a deal with Airbus over control of Spirit factories that produce parts for Airbus. But if you're the company that's had all the quality issues, and the answer, okay, and Andrew, you said, yeah, because they don't have enough money. Okay, you're the capitalist here. I'm the person saying, if I had quality issues, I'd be adding 400 employees. I wouldn't be cutting my workforce in half when you're the one that's been screwing up, not finding the holes in the fuselages. Now there's 450 less people to make good products. Does that make sense? That's a bad system of capitalism.
Less flights. What are you going to do about the flights?
What do you mean?
They're cutting back on everything. So you don't need as many people.
Shareholders might have to suffer a little bit while you make sure. You're the one that got into this mess. It's not this, it's not anybody else's fault.
Oh, you know this story better than I do. So does this mean that they're flying the same number of flights as before?
No, it's Spirit Aerosystems.
It's Spirit Aerosystems, not
builder.
So the builder for Boeing. You mean so Boeing doesn't need as much stuff.
They're not selling as many planes.
But that's going to be bad news for all of the airlines.
That's true. But the ones they do sell, the doors won't fly out at 30,000 feet.
I hope you're right.
In the capitalist system, this is the way it works. They don't have enough money. You immediately got to do more with less. But you see what I mean? It's not.
But this is going to be bad news for all of the airlines that are waiting for additional planes to be delivered, because it probably is going to slow that process. And we've heard warnings of this. We've heard rumblings of this. We know things are slowing down. This is going to be a complicating factor.
Because not all those 450 employees were the ones that screwed up. I don't know if anyone hasn't at least heard about this yet. You probably have. If you haven't, I don't know. You're in a tunnel or something. World #1 golfer Scotty Sheffler was detained by Louisville Metro Police this morning. He was trying to drive into the entrance of where the PGA is being held at Valhalla Golf Club for that championship. Traffic outside the course had been stopped after a man was struck and killed by a shuttle bus earlier in the morning. An ESPN reporter who witnessed the incident said Sheffler was trying to drive around the crash scene up on the median. A police officer instructed him to stop, but Sheffler continued to drive. At one point, the officer attached himself to the side of Scheffler's car. Then finally, Sheffler stopped and rolled down his window. The officer grabbed him, opened the door, pulled him out of the vehicle, and he was handcuffed. He's now been booked by the Louisville police on charges of second-degree assault of a police officer, which is a felony, as well as a misdemeanor charge of criminal mischief, reckless driving, and disregarding signals from an officer directing traffic. A mugshot's out. It's the biggest trending story on everywhere, but on Twitter, and every take you can imagine is on Twitter. The people that are on his side, not on.
While we were trying to get some details worked out, we've been talking about this in just about every
taking
break.
little memes of movies where someone's driving by Arnold Schwarzenegger and they're saying that and that's Rory McIlroy waving to Scotty Sheffler.
I think the question when we first started hearing about this, our assumption was he'd be able to get there for the later tee time. The tee times were delayed by an hour,
and he had a 10:08.
But when you hear the charges those are serious charges. This is not just disregarding an officer and something along those lines. I don't know how quickly.
Felony, you're going to be in the
you're not going to get out
for a little
unless
bit.
there's something where they clear this up. But those charges are quite a bit more serious than I would have anticipated. I think it's going to be interesting. Let's see the footage from the body cam
to see exactly what happened.
Right.
In a lot of cases like this, though, this is a big money event. He's the #1 golfer in the world. He's Xander Schauffele is some, 5-6 strokes ahead, but usually money, you'd want him there, wouldn't you? We don't know what he did.
The law should be the law.
No one's above the law, but how do we know it?
And the body cam's going to decide it.
There are some,
because I
obviously,
take the side of this, not knowing what
there's a meme
happened.
of the arresting cop getting. He was who is he exactly? Getting a call from the police captain. There's also someone talking to his son saying, Dad, didn't Valhalla and Louisville used to host major golf tournaments? Yes, son, there was a time when they were allowed to do it. But it's just every take you can possibly see is on Twitter.
And again, you could.
Huh?
Yeah, someone had the field this weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody said.
Oh my God, I didn't think about it.
Somebody
how many
said
people had Sheffler? I thought about taking Sheffler.
Well, somebody said that the police officer worked as a security guard on the side for Liv for the golf tour. But I mean, every possible take until you see what actually happened. You can understand. It's going to be hard to take a side.
And he's #1, and the great Tiger Woods.
Nobody's above the law.
Great Tiger Woods had some. So, he had a terrible accident, and he had the Escalade with the golf club, and someone saying the torch has officially been passed.
Yeah.
golf is so back.
My favorite was somebody said golf. This is proof that golf players are overpaid.
Because no one.
They didn't know who the number one golfer in the
Scotty
world was.
Sheffler. I think he still has a beard. He's such a nice guy. I've seen. I think from what I've seen when he wins tournament.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up, the Supreme Court rejects a challenge to the funding of the watchdog Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a decision that saves the agency from basically being hobbled out of existence. CFPB Director Rohit Chopra.
We're working on a lot of fronts, Becky, from making the mortgage market more competitive and fair, tackling credit card fees and interest rates, the scourge of junk fees.
And the war of words in a House committee meeting right in front of the cameras, naturally.
That is absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack the physical appearance of another person?
Are your feelings hurt?
Much more Squawk Pod is right ahead. This is Squawk Pod with Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue her, please.
All right, the Supreme Court has rejected a business-backed challenge against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's funding structure. In a 7-2 vote, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote, although there may be other constitutional checks on Congress's authority to create and fund an administrative agency, specifying the source and purpose is all the control the Appropriations Clause requires. CFPB Director Rohit Chopra joins us this morning. And Director Chopra, thanks for being here today. This could have been an existential crisis for the CFPB. If Congress or if the Supreme Court had ruled against you in this issue, it would have brought questions about every rulemaking that you've had, every enforcement that you've had since the Bureau was first created 13 years ago. How are you feeling today?
Well, a lot of relief. If this went the wrong way, we could have seen quite a bit of turbulence in so many markets. You know, our financial markets depend on clarity, and that's really what we are trying to provide, as well as some accountability for those who violate the law and take advantage of consumers. So we see this as a big victory and sigh of relief for all the people who depend on that.
Let me tell you what a couple of the groups that have been kind of pushing back and fighting against you over the years have said. The American Financial Services Association says, while there may be CFPB staff breathing a sigh of relief over the ruling, the Supreme Court decision does nothing to bring clarity or transparency for consumers, the consumer credit marketplace, or congressional oversight. The Consumer Bankers Association says that this should not be considered a popular endorsement of the CFPB's recent and seemingly political rulemakings, many of which they say have skipped important legal requirements. I guess the point is those on the other side who are arguing with you probably won't go quietly into the night, although both of those organizations say they look forward to continuing working with you in the future. What does this mean just from a logistics perspective or from a reality perspective, what you are going to be able to do at this point and what you plan to pick up next?
Well, there's never going to be a time when big, powerful lobbyists just throw in the towel. They're going to keep fighting us, of course, because what we're doing is we're enforcing the law and making the markets work better so that people can't be cheated. So we're working on a lot of fronts, Becky, from making the mortgage market more competitive and fair, tackling credit card fees and interest rates, the scourge of junk fees that have creeped across so many markets. So all these lobbyists, junk fee lobbyists, others, they'll keep fighting, but we're going to keep doing our work every day. And honestly, that's what's really good for the markets, for there to be a set of rules that are fairly enforced.
What's the primary focus for you right now, just in terms of the next action you're going to be focusing on? People have pointed to popular credit cards and airline rewards programs that the airlines have set up.
Well, last week, Secretary Buttigieg and I hosted a hearing about these credit card rewards markets, and I'm really worried that people hear promises about points, and then suddenly it gets devalued, losing a lot of value for themselves. We invited some of the biggest credit card companies and airlines, and they were no-shows. We're going to keep going when it comes to credit cards. People are paying huge rates and huge fees. We're going to tackle them. The high interest rate environment is actually making a lot of people have some stress on their bills because of those high rates. We want to make sure no one is taken advantage of and that people are able to pay those bills and get ahead in their life. Becky, we had a lot of cases that were put on hold pending this Supreme Court decision. With this decision behind us, all of those lawsuits will start to restart, and we will be able to seek justice for all of those individuals who we think have been taken advantage of.
Rohit, it sounds like it's full speed ahead from your perspective on this. I just want to dig into some of the pushback that you get, let's say on the airline rewards programs. The industry has said, and again, this is the industry pushing back, but the industry has said that if the bill that you all are supporting passes Congress, it could mean that the funding for those rewards programs gets stripped away, in which case they won't be able to continue the rewards program. So the entire thing that you're worried about, that those rewards programs eventually become value free, have no benefit to any consumer who's been signing up and using them for years, could come true because of the bill that would be passed to prevent that from happening.
Well, the CFPB is working on law enforcement and holding these folks accountable for their promises. I want to make sure that when a consumer is getting a promise about rewards, that people are living up to it. We had to take an enforcement action against Bank of America for falsely implying that they would give cash for signups and then they didn't come through with it. So I think what we're doing is bread and butter, trying to make sure that there isn't false advertising, fraud, and scams.
Do you worry about the goal of the agency? I mean, it does seem to swing pretty radically depending on which administration's in charge. The goals that you go after, if there's a change in administration, aren't lasting ones. And I realize that's the case with all federal agencies, but it does seem to be more the case with the CFPB. When Donald Trump was in power last time, he had someone there who did not want to see a lot of this happening. And this seems like an agency that is particularly rife for being swung in the political directions of whatever administration is in place. It seems like it's pretty tough for businesses to try and take direction from that.
Well, the key is we have these laws on the books, and it's our job to enforce them. We have to make sure that it's not just about protecting consumers, it's also about making sure that the companies, startups, and others who are playing by the rules are not disadvantaged by those who try and cheat people. So I actually see this, Becky, as pretty straightforward. I don't want to see the ping-ponging. I want every single person in my seat during this whole agency to vigorously enforce the law as Congress has said, because I think that's what makes American markets work well. When we don't have any rule of law and when not everyone is following the rules, it's chaotic and it just doesn't work well.
Director Chopra, thank you for your time today.
We're going to put this in the water cooler story category this morning. A House Oversight Committee hearing devolved into insults last night. I don't need to explain. Just take a look.
I'd like to know if any of the Democrats on this committee are employing Judge Merchan's daughter.
Please tell me what that has to do with Merrick Garland.
Is she a porn star?
Do you know what we're here for? You know we're here about AG.
I don't think you know what you're here for.
Well, you the one talking about.
I think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
No, ain't nothing.
Hold on.
Listen.
That is absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack the physical appearance of another person?
Are your feelings hurt?
Her words down. Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
Baby girl? I don't think
we are going to move and we're going to take your words down.
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling. If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
What now?
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene eventually agreed to have those words of hers taken down from the record, but refused to apologize. So this is what we've
devolved to.
This is what America apparently wants. I hate to say it, but apparently this is what America wants.
Well, you saw the rest of the interchange too. It got crazy. It got crazy.
I didn't see beyond that.
But it's crazy. It's really crazy. But we only have ourselves to blame.
We do. I mean, we've heard things. We're hearing crazy stuff out of Congress about Israel and all. I watch every day, and I think, you got elected. You really got elected? So there are individual little pockets around this country where you can elect some people that probably aren't mainstream.
It's because people don't turn out. It's because people don't turn out for the early rounds of these things, where the votes are decided by 6
I
and
think
7%
some are getting
of the vote
primaried. Some of them are getting primaried. Some of the more extreme factions are getting primaried.
But you recognize that there's extremes on both sides.
Yeah.
And you say to yourself, is this the role models you want for your kids? I think that's like a fair question. But that same question is now not just happening in small pockets of the country. That's also part of the larger conversation about this presidential election. It is.
And your point is that you know the history of Biden. So you're talking about Trump, that he's a bad role model. You think Biden is a good role model?
I think there's a fair question about character and I do not put them in the same category.
Really?
Really?
Well, see,
I know you disagree with me.
That's where the disagreement was.
Right. That you think that Biden is like as a radical. You
Let's
put him
not
in
say
the
anything we have to strike
radical
from the record.
Yeah, exactly. Coming up
category. It just doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I can show you his entire career through
I know
all
you can. It's on Twitter. I know.
Okay.
Next on Squawk Pod, raising the anxious generation. What a plugged-in smartphone childhood is changing. Social scientist and author Jonathan Haidt joins us.
Mental health stats were pretty stable for American teenagers from the late 90s all the way through 2010, 2011. Then all of a sudden, rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm go shooting up for girls. Time on social media is bad for kids. It correlates with negative mental health.
You're listening to Squawk Pod. Here's Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. Smartphones and social media addictions are destroying our children's lives. That is a message, and it's an important one from John Haidt's new book, The Anxious Generation, which also details a 4-part solution to this growing and unfortunately very familiar problem for so many parents around the country. For more on this and his take on the recent campus protests and so many other issues, I want to bring in John Haidt, a social psychologist and professor of ethical leadership at New York University's Stern Business School. And it is a book, if you haven't had a chance, folks in the audience, to read it, go out and get it, because it speaks so loudly about, I think, so many of the issues that we're all confronting. Speak to what you think is the fundamental problem when it comes to social media. But also, I'm very curious what the reaction has been, because this has been a very popular book, from either social media companies or maybe the phone companies.
Sure.
Have you heard from these folks?
Yeah. So let me start with what the problem is. Thanks so much for having me on. Mental health stats were pretty stable for American teenagers from the late 90s all the way through 2010, 2011. Then all of a sudden, rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm go shooting up for girls, very sharp. For boys, they go up too, but not quite as sharp. We have an epidemic of kids saying they're depressed, they're anxious. Suicide rates are up 50% for teenagers since 2010. 25% of American teen girls say they've made a suicide plan already. So something went crazy wrong in the early 2010s. And we didn't know what it was for a while. But once we see that the same thing happened in Canada, Britain, Australia, many, many countries, now it kind of narrows things down. And there's experimental evidence, too, showing that time on social media is bad for kids. It correlates with negative mental health. So everyone has seen it. I'm in a debate with some other psychologists, but all the parents, all the journalists I talk to, everyone has seen it in their own kids. So I think the story is resonating very widely. Now, as for what the tech companies are doing to push back, the only thing I know from some journalists is that Meta is sending around some papers by its favorite researchers saying, hey, you should look at this, you should ask Haidt about this. That's fine. Of course, they have a PR department. Of course, they should be doing that. But so far, no, I haven't found any dead horses in my bed or anything like that.
Some of these companies have tried to create ways, Apple has screen time and other things. I find, to be honest, this is the least effective. I love Apple for many things. Yeah. The screen time function and my ability to control what my kids can do is the least effective thing on this entire product line.
That's right. So once you give your child a smartphone, the technology is so much fun. It's so addictive because you get the rapid feedback and the great colors. So once you give your child their own personal iPhone or iPad or tablet, it will move to the center of their lives, and it will stay there for the rest of their lives. So parents have to be thoughtful. Is the age 6? At what age do I want my child to withdraw from the real world and spend? Now teenagers are spending 5 hours a day just on social media, about 9 hours a day on their phones, And half of them say they're online almost constantly. So what age do you want to start that? Because once you start it, you get all the conflicts that you...
Is there any safe amount of time? Or is this like no screen time?
The way to think about this is what kids really, really need is play and social interaction in the real world. Face-to-face, wrestling, putting their arms around their friends. All that stuff plummets after 2012 because kids are spending all day, even at school, they're doing this at school. They're not playing with their friends as much. So they need play in the real world. In terms of a safe amount of time, I wouldn't think that way. I would think stories are good. Humans live in stories. If you want to watch a movie with your kid, that's fine. If you want your kid occasionally to watch an episode of a cartoon, that's fine. But it's the interaction for hours a day, that's what seems to really be harmful.
So before you sat down, or before the cameras started rolling, you suggested to me you think that there's a sea change that's about to happen, potentially in this country, and you're already starting to see it in parts of Europe.
That's right.
What do you mean by that?
So we parents have had a creeping sense since the early 2010s. Once our kids got these devices, we felt like, oh, the kid's quiet. Oh, this is great. I can do my work. But over time, we just watch our kids. We've all had a creepy sense that something is wrong here. This isn't right. And then as kids got more and more depressed and anxious, we really had a sense, but we didn't know what to do. We weren't sure. In Britain, in February, the parents' revolution began.
Parents' revolution.
Parents' revolution.
What is the parents' revolution?
So mothers in particular, they really see it. They're really upset by what's going on. A couple of mothers put up an Instagram post about a WhatsApp group that they had. And overnight, thousands and thousands of British parents joined. They now have to have hundreds of WhatsApp groups. They're organizing. It's smartphonefreechildhood.co.uk. The government...
Smartphonefreechildhood.co.uk.
That's in Britain. And there are lots of groups in the United States. If you go to anxiousgeneration.com, we have a list of about 30 or 40 organizations in the United States. And so the parents are up in arms saying, we've got to do something about this. We've got to come together. We've got to agree not to give our kids a smartphone until 14 or 16. I recommend 14 is the minimum. And in Britain, the government is acting. They've passed two of the best laws on the planet to regulate social media, to require them to treat children differently, that children are not adults, you have to treat them with some care, and to push us towards age verification, which we have to have.
China's been pretty effective too. They say no playing video games.
That's right. That's right. The Chinese are able to do things that we can't in a free society, and they see the problem, and they have put limits on screen time. They've put limits on TikTok. They're very happy.
Regulators could do something about this, though. They've chosen
in the United States. Yeah, in the United States. Well, of course, whatever we do, the tech industry, they have a trade group. Right. They sue, and everything's going to get held up. But I think the Florida law is a great example of a nice, straightforward law. 16 is the minimum age. 15 or 14 if you have parental permission to open an account.
Are there any tools, technological tools, that you suggest parents use at all? I think that's just not even a workable scenario. Because my kids know, if they change the time zone they're in, or do all sorts of other things, then all of a sudden I'm out of luck.
Once you give your kid their own personal device, you're going to be in this game that we're all playing. It's a constant struggle. Technology conflicts define our family life. Is that what we want? So what I'm arguing is 4 norms, we can change this. If we go for 4 norms, we can change this. 1, no smartphone before high school. We got to clear this out of the lives of elementary and middle school kids.
But you need the entire classes to do it collectively.
You need half the class to do it. If half the class does it, now it's easy to say, because what we don't want is our kids to say, Mom, I'm the only one. Everyone's making fun of me. That's why we give in.
And then you realize that your kid is being left out, because I was holding out for a long time, and then I felt like I was making my kid be a social pariah, because they were all having these text chats. He was left out of everything, and he was going to be, this is the equivalent of bike helmet laws.
That's right. So that's why this is a collective action trap. That's the key to the whole thing. You were alone. You did the right thing, but you imposed a cost on your daughter. What if half the kids in your daughter's class had followed this advice? Then it would be easy. And then once we get there, then people see and
so
then
that's
you can
step 1. You said there's 4.
Yeah. Number 2, no social media before 16. What is the proper age at which you want your daughter interacting with strange men pretending to be young girls or boys? Right. What is the proper age you want them to see beheading videos? I don't think it's 9, 10, 11, 12, or 13. I think really it should be 18. But let's say 16 should be our minimum. We just don't allow them to open. Social media is just not appropriate for minors. 3rd norm is the easiest and a really powerful one. Phone-free schools. The evidence is really clear. When kids have the entire internet in their pocket, on their desk at school, they're using it, even if they're not supposed to. So you have to take the phones, you have to lock them up in a special phone locker or a yonder pouch in the morning. They get it back at the end of the day. When schools do that, it's spectacular. The people say, in the hallways, they hear laughter again. It used to be silent in between classes. And then the 4th norm is far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. Because if we're going to greatly reduce the role of these things in kids' lives, we have to give them back play, fun, adventure, each other, time together.
Can I ask you a related question? It's not on device, but how you feel about video games? There's both Roblox, which is supposed to be something where the kids are interacting in a way, and as they get older, unfortunately, I've got some kids that are now getting older, and they're playing Fortnite. I'm not in love with it, but it's also a way for them to communicate and play effectively with the friends. I would much prefer that they be rolling around in the dirt, but this is how they do it.
There were video games before 2010. It's the social media stuff that. I
Well,
don't think video games.
But video games have changed a lot, and so we have to tell the boys' story. The boys' story is different. When everybody got their devices, the girls went, especially for social media. The boys went for video games. Video games are not harming most boys, but they are harming a lot for a couple of reasons. One is that between 5 and 10% do get addicted. If you're letting your son play video games 3-4 hours a day, it's going to change the dopamine circuits in their brain. 5 to 10% do get addicted. That causes problems in every other part of their life. The second thing is, for most of the boys, it's pushing out time together. It's not, you can't, if a boy wants to play with his friends, he can't go to his friend's house. He has to go home, so he can have his own headset, his own controller. So time with friends has dropped 65% since 2010. Kids need each other. They don't need to talk over screens.
John, thank you for coming in. The book is called The Anxious Generation, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Becky's ESPN's reporting. He's been released.
He's been released.
And he's gonna make his 10:08 tea time.
Crazy.
He's got to get to. You wanted to throw the book at him. I think he's going to make it to the putting green. Hopefully, hit a few balls.
Michael Kim, another golfer on the tour, tweeted, "I assume Scotty thought there was a small issue causing some traffic, and with a courtesy car, cops usually let us go.
Do they
through,
drop
so
the charges?
Caught up unnecessarily. Scotty was probably just thinking, I need to get to the course to start my routine on time. Obviously, with the circumstances, the cop was on edge and not letting anything go. We'll see how this plays out.
But I mean, is he still facing felony charges?
I doubt it. Not if he's making his tee
Can you
time.
just drop him? Or?
Maybe there's a misunderstanding.
And then it's going to be, drop the charges for the big #1 golfer.
Look, we'll see how this all works out. We'll see how he plays today. Something to watch.
That's Squawk Pod for today and for the week. Happy Friday to you. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. Follow us on X, once known as Twitter, at Squawk CNBC for video clips from our interviews. And listen to this podcast to get the best of all of it anytime. Have a great weekend, and we'll meet you right back here on Monday.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.